Ugh.
It's like extra crunchy in there for no
I
reason.
know, right?
It's on airplane mode. You gotta include that audio in there.
Dude. Why are we drinking out of red cups? Like, we look like
I don't know.
some douchebag, like...
The new thing is... This episode's brought to you by... Dr. Pepper.
Dr. Pepper.
I drink DP every day on the JRE.
You know what's funny is I have recently found my way back to Dr. Pepper. I don't know why, but like the other day I was in Publix, I think it was. I gotta talk into this microphone. I was in Publix and I was like, I don't want Coke. I don't want Mountain Dew. I want something slightly different.
Slightly less good.
Yeah, it's like. And so I was like, I think Dr. Pepper is just the way for me.
Just mediocrity in a cup. Like your day is just going so-so. Have a Dr. Pepper. Just like if you get like a C. Your family's like, here's a Dr. Pepper.
It's so true. I mean, Dr. Pepper is just, it's on like another, it's not on the level of Coke, that's for sure. It's definitely not.
You're talking about another level, you mean average?
Yeah.
Like C's across the board.
Yeah,
I'm
totally.
trying to figure out, they're like 23 flavors. What are they? It's like,
Bad, really bad.
I think it's okay. And you guys aren't paying. That's why. That's why we're trashing you. So
If they were paying us, I mean, it might taste better.
it'd be a different story.
Yeah.
I'm not saying I'd lie for you, but you know.
I wouldn't risk my ministry over you, but.
No, I get paid. Sure. I drink Dr. Pepper water on stage.
Yeah, exactly.
When you're ready to go live.
I mean, we're live right now.
Oh, that's it. No countdowns.
There ain't no countdown. Let's just go. But no, you need to give your credentials. This is something me and you have talked about. Is I have not done a very good job of being like, hey, what do you do? Who are you?
All right. So credentials.
Bishop, apostle, whatever.
None of those things actually. So yeah, I guess this is a credential, right? So I've been saved 10 years, going on 11 this year. Got ordained through the Church of God in Christ. My background is atheism, so I actually was led to the Lord through a prophetic word in the Destin Commons, thanks to Ned Merriman and Edgar Irahita.
I didn't realize that happened here.
It happened here.
Oh.
Yeah. We were, it was during one of the nights of like the Mullet Festival, so it was actually like in October. So
7 years ago, you said?
No, 10.
10 years ago.
Yeah,
Okay.
10 years ago. My cousin was there, and two other gentlemen. They're also there at the time. But it wasn't one of those moments where it was like they knew what was happening for me internally. Mm-hmm. You know, everybody just kind of knew how I felt about like religion. But it wasn't one of those things where it was like, you know, it wasn't a teary-eyed moment in the midst of it all happening or anything like that. So what it was for me was just this like realization, having like the Holy Spirit, even in that moment, working to bring something back to my remembrance, which was just the fact that like in about 7th grade, about 7th, 8th grade, you know, my parents were like arguing downstairs. It was kind of a regular theme of them arguing. He's hungry for this word.
Yeah,
right
it's my stomach, man. It's talking.
Yeah.
I just had some chocolate chip cookies and they were good. Need some more.
Chocolate cookies. That's crazy. But yeah, so just having this moment of like trying to get away from all that. I was upstairs in my room at a fish tank, and I would just watch my goldfish and koi fish just like swim around in there. So that was like my way of like decompressing. And so as I was trying to do that, I don't know what kind of came over me in that moment, but I was just really fed up. You know what I mean? Because my mom was this person who went to church all the time. If the doors were open, she was there. If the doors were closed, she was the person cleaning the church, filling, putting the envelopes in there, connect type card things. She was that person. So she was like all in hospitality without being a person who was actually like, verified with like a title or anything like that. She just served completely and totally. And so just seeing like elements of her life just be like utter hell, and, being very observant of like the kids of like ministers, and then even how people would treat each other within different church settings. It was just very like off-putting to me. So I was just like this, like they if they can't believe this, you know what I mean, in the context of being around each other, then it feels like a performance, like walking into a church and like everybody's in on it kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I think that's probably why it was like special for me to like have my God encounter outside of church, because like honestly, there were times where people had gave prophetic words around me, but it was like a duck, duck, goose kind of thing, where it was like, everybody else was getting picked. So I was like, I'm not really part of what's happening right now. So anyways, I had this moment where I was just like, all right, if God is real, God would speak to me face to face. He would tell me things about myself that nobody else can possibly know. And then and only then would I even like consider it. Now, that had nothing to do with like the stuff that was going on in the rest of my life. So I don't know where that came from. But I think it was just this initial like pondering, within my heart, to kind of wrestle with what I already believed, which was pretty much nothing. Like this was just a coping mechanism for everybody else kind of thing. And so, yeah, you fast forward those years from, 7th, 8th grade to a little bit after high school, going to the Mullet Festival with some friends, due to like them trying to cheer me up after like a breakup with like the person like I pined after all of my little time here, because I came from Japan and just kind of got dropped into things at like the end of 10th grade, beginning of 11th grade. So I was kind of starting over again. Some of those other troubles and issues still followed, but they were, it was just like this constant thing. So anyways, they take me to the Mullet Festival to try to like help cheer me up and stuff. And it does not work, because if you don't know what the Mullet Festival is, it is like the redneck carnival, like on steroids. No offense with the word redneck. I just mean it's very country.
Don't talk about my people now.
Yeah, well, it was not what I expected. And so just in a couple minutes of being out there, it's just like, I don't even think I really had any money for anything either. So it wasn't the best time. It's like either walk around in the fog of smoke, watch people drink, and look at food you can't buy.
Right.
And like a bunch of kids running back and forth, chasing each other down, saying y'all a lot. So we end up going out to the Destin Commons, and it's like quiet because it's kind of late at night. The stores are pretty much closed up. And then, as I can recall, there's like this red Corvette that kind of pulls up, has like these two blonde chicks in it. And like, they look great. It's like, what is this? But, they just kind of like wave through, and we're all like, whoa. And then these two guys kind of like staring at us, like off to the side, And like, what do those guys want?
It's like, is that the Klan or?
I have no idea. Well, it was an odd pairing, right? Because you have a tall, like white guy, no beard.
Oh, okay.
And then you have just like a shorter, like some kind of Hispanic guy. You can't tell like from a distance or anything like that. And so we're looking at them, they're looking at us. It's kind of like Pokemon. It's like your eyes meet, like you have to talk to each other. So they come up and I'm like, yeah, what do you want? Because they're gonna stare at us. And they're like, yeah, no, we're just out here, just trying to, tell people about the Lord and just offer people prayer. Like, offer people prayer. So in my mind, it was just like, because, at the moment, I'm kind of like the de facto leader of our friend group, because they kind of know how I feel about things.
Right, yeah.
And so I'm just kind of like, all right, well, it's not going to hurt because it can't help either. So
Right.
you guys can go ahead. And I've been used to people praying before, right? So it's like, out of respect, you just kind of like bow your head, but not really because it's like strangers. You kind of your head down a little bit. And as soon as like the white gentleman, I have to describe him this way for the purpose of the story, says, Father, just in Jesus' name. And like, he doesn't really get too much farther than that. He's not saying anything. So I look up. He's looking at me just like you are right now. Mm-hmm. He said, "What's your name?" I'm like, "My name's Greg." What do you want? He's like, "Well, Greg, the Lord says," and then starts rattling off things about my life that nobody else could have known. Even my blood cousin who's right there with me. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And so he wasn't with me for a lot of time in my life, being that I went back and forth to Japan, but he was there enough. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then these two guys who were pretty much some of my closest friends at the moment. So it's like, I'm just sitting here, in this moment. Mm-hmm. And they go from me to my cousin, and they're talking about him in leadership and athletics and things like that. Now in this present day, he's in the Army. He's doing very well for himself. And in terms of athletics, like he did end up getting some scholarship offers for football. Like, so when it comes down to the other two guys, some things were, identified in their lives, and it's like all verifiable from what I knew, about them and what I understood. So we end up leaving from there. We did exchange information. They were talking about, they had this young adults group called Crying Out. And from that moment, like, we just kind of departed from one another. We did add each other on Facebook. And so it's kind of like, well, they had no mutual friends with any of us, you know what I mean? So there's no way you could really plan that, you know what I mean? It happened. Of course, now I know it's like a God thing. It was a God-ordained moment, a God-ordained time. So we get back in the car, we're leaving. And then from there, it's like there's no music. It's just quiet. Everybody's just kind of taking it all in, contemplating. So someone asked me, like, is that true? Is that stuff true? And I was just like, yeah. It's like all true. And so within myself, I was just like, all right, if this is real, then I'm going to give it, like 6 months. No, I'm going to give it a year. I'm going to give it a year. Because I said I want to give this time to flesh itself out, whatever it is, At the time, honestly, I was already working within the Church of God in Christ. I was like one of the oldest youth they had at the time. So it was like the transition is supposed to be, you go through, your times of being taught, and they're trying to transform you into a teacher. Mm-hmm. So like here I am, like set to teach Sunday school and everything, but like I don't believe anything.
Right.
But there's no real vetting for that. It's just like, hey, like, you're one of the older kids, some stuff about the word, and it's easier for you to reach the younger kids than it would be for us.
Yeah.
So I say all that to say, like, I was already in place to do things for God, but I just had no, level of like relationship or anything like that. Mm-hmm. So having this encounter, it sparked me to like literally just sit up all night with like a tablet that I had, this old like, janky tablet, and throw on YouTube and click on the first thing I saw like about God, So it was like some Paul Washer clips. So I ended up in some sermon jams finding out about Paul Washer from Paul Washer.
If my wife was here, she'd be speaking in tongues already.
Yeah, well, if she believes it, because I don't think he did. So Paul Washer and David Wilkerson. Those are the two people like I landed on.
Love David Wilkerson.
Yeah, and it was to the point of like, let's say it's the first day of the month. Like I forgot to turn off my data and just left Wi-Fi on. Just like 2 days into the month, I burned through all my data. And had like 1 gig left. I'm sharing between my phone and tablet. So like
29 days.
Exactly. Yeah. So I was just trying to be extra careful, like telling people on Facebook, like, don't message me. Yeah. I'll message you when I'm home and Wi-Fi kind of thing. Mm-hmm. So excuse me. So yeah, there I am. Now like freshly saved, but I had all these years of experience because I was in sound booths. It was like as a church kid, or a kid who's growing up inside of church, it's like, where's the one place you can go where people don't mess with you? go to the sound booth.
Go to the sound booth.
It's either that or play an instrument. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
There's like
so true.
no one's
It's a
gonna.
good place to hide.
Yeah, no one's gonna check on you. They just want you using your skill.
Yeah.
So, I would either be back there, like, especially even like at First Church, like, you know, sorry, the room's gone now, but there's like this little room where they had like a kind of like a dark glass, like a tinted glass right there, so you couldn't really peek into it. You know, you'd have to be like at the perfect angle, but you couldn't see what we're doing anyway. You could just like see our eyes, like we could see yours.
Right.
So like playing on my phone and stuff like that. Years before that, playing on the Game Boy back there, like I just had to tweak something at like the right time, sort of deal. So, but just if you think about it, it's like all these years of just like absorbing like the word, just with no filter. I have to hear it because I have to know when to stop recordings and things like that.
Yeah.
So, just within that 6 months, because I said, all right, if God's real, give him a year. Within 6 months, like my life is radically different. Not that external things changed really, but like I was different, and so I was able to start handling them differently. So when it comes down to the credentials, you know, got saved 10 years ago, get ordained within 3 or 4 years of being saved, and you know, from there, I'm currently at Vision Church for Walton Beach, so right down here where the BHP is.
Yeah.
And I'm actually serving underneath Pastor Ned Merriman, who was the gangly white guy who was there that night. And Edgar Irahita was also a pastor of ours for a time. So I ended up being pastored by both of those guys just all these years later. And yeah, now it's just trying to do what we can for the community in terms of bringing forth like the vision of God for this particular region and, you know, going after it for the kingdom. So it's a long answer for your small question.
Yeah. There's a lot to unpack there. A lot.
Go for it. Yeah. What you got?
Well, I mean, like, you went from being an atheist to being almost. I mean, every time I talk about you, I always say the same thing. I'm like, he's this basically like one of the associate pastors at Vision Church, Fort Walton Beach, and everybody's like, "Oh, okay, well that's good," but 10 years ago, you didn't even believe in God. So I mean, it's like it's a whole thing. It really is a whole thing.
Yeah.
How does that make you feel, like having a decade in God now?
I still feel very young.
Yeah.
Like, you know, I think it's also.
By the way, your collar is like
It's coming up.
it's janky.
It's bad.
It's
All
bad.
right.
Yeah. I know you ironed that shirt and you were trying to look real nice.
I know it. Well, if you're
collar's
listening,
giving you problems.
if you're a listener, good for you. If you're watching, I'm sorry. There was a lot of warfare.
There we
saints.
go. It's looking good now.
A lot of warfare, saints, to get down here tonight.
It was a lot of warfare just getting started tonight. I mean, we broke chargers trying to get started. Like, I couldn't get the phones to work, the cameras to work.
It's a whole lot of things.
A lot of things didn't work. But anyway,
Yes. So,
a decade in God.
It doesn't feel that long, though, because that's not all time of being on fire. You know, there were seasons of just like great pain and difficulty. And to go from this experience of being like absolutely on fire, you know, totally zealous, maybe even too much so in the wrong direction, maybe like coming kind of legalistic. Like now it feels like there's more of a balancing that happened.
Yeah.
Because, you know, getting away from those like those small pockets of sin, but those pockets of sin after you know better, after you've taught yourself, are devastating because you feel like you're not that person who you were when you started.
Yeah.
Like that person is more valuable to God than who you are now in that moment. So now being here 10 years in a position of, you know, somewhat leadership, really like our role in Vision Church, myself and my wife, Elizabeth, people call her Liz. So I'm going to refer to her as Liz from here on out. Yeah. Like,
It's like, who's Elizabeth?
right.
Who's that?
Yeah. Liz.
That's your side chick? Like, what's going on?
Whoa. Not out of my mouth. I'm going to get canceled for other things, but not that. No, so like, and I think having kids helped, like, because now people see you as like more mature, you know what I mean? Like you actually are doing something in your life.
Yeah.
Versus like being single and still having like 10 years in. It's just kind of like people like, hey, you haven't experienced enough life. You know what I mean? And that was particularly a challenge, like in getting ordained, because my pastor wanted to do it sooner than that like 4-year period. But it's like, well, as young as you are, people aren't going to receive you.
Yeah.
You're ready, but people aren't going to receive you because like they may think that even where you are right now is just kind of a, like a trope for your life. Like this is just a moment. And so they're just going to, watch you and then see what this becomes. So yeah, now after all this time, it actually still feels like the beginning of like the real ministry intent of God in our lives, and everything else was just kind of practice for that, because I really did understand like that for what God really wanted to do in terms of ministry in my life was actually connected to being married. And a lot of people don't have that like inclination. Usually it's like, or you feel that what God has called you to, and then you meet this other person and you guys are kind of figuring that part together. And then finally you're trying to merge the two things to say, okay, what does this look like for us? Like as a couple in marriage.
And that's tough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In marriage and ministry. But Liz had actually already received like prophetic words, like, the guy you're going to marry and all that. He's already in ministry and whatnot. And for myself, I only had like maybe one that pertained to marriage. And it was a lady who was in First Church. She said something to the effect of like, the person who you're looking for, because he who finds a wife finds a good thing. The person you're looking for is like on your level spiritually. So like our relationship began through us just talking about, deliverance in our backgrounds, things we experienced with God and, because of God, and finally like literal like deliverance, like our experiences of just like coming out of particular sins and issues and things like that, and like trying to do everything you can to like stay focused, stay on fire. So now I feel, because of time, maybe 1 or 2 gray hairs, and some accomplishments in the natural, it feels like things are kind of like coming into its real beginning. And maybe so, turning 30 this year, so Jesus gets credit at 30 officially. Could be
same. Turning 32, so I'm 30 as well this year, so ugh.
Yeah, well, it's good for Jesus. It's good for me.
Hopefully.
Yeah.
Yeah. You just made the transition from having 1 child to 3 children.
That's right. So we have
You have twins.
at the airing of this broadcast, we have a 2-year-old named Roman, and then we have twins who are Genesis and Israel. So
this was actually scheduled for.
We were trying to do all this before they came, and
it just didn't happen.
Yeah, it didn't happen. I was actually supposed to be guest number 1.
Yes. Robert Martin beat you out.
Well, yeah, good for him. Not a salty person. But yeah, so I mean, whatever you want to think about that, you're probably right. Like that transition.
Yeah.
It's
rough.
It's been, yeah. Kids are like a joyous thing, obviously. Like when you get to enjoy them, when you're just like tired all the time, and you have to try to reconstitute your marriage to like include 2 more kids.
Yeah, it did include all the time in there as an asterisk. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I only have 2, and mine 3 months. I mean, he turned 5 months yesterday, but just having 1 newborn is it's a thing, man. It's a big deal.
Wow.
I couldn't imagine having 2 at the same time.
Well, yeah. I mean, the thing is, like, the truth is, like, they'll wake each other up.
Yeah.
They'll cry. One will cry. The other one starts crying for like no reason, kind of thing. It's like a sympathetic moment. Like you have to like fight to feed one or the other. So like it literally takes both of us most of the time to be able to handle it all. And then this just continues through the night and like through the day.
Yeah.
And but also like honestly trying not to forget Roman or to put him relationally on the back burner. That's exactly what I was gonna say.
Yep.
And trying to juggle out like not affection because you love them all equally, but attention, proper attention. And so, that part has been tough. I know on the other side of this, it'll be a lot better, a lot sooner, right? Because we're already capped out. Like we feel like 3 is our limit. So from there, just being responsible parents and trying to get them into like informative years, and then, out of the house.
Yeah.
But with the goal of raising, godly offspring and getting to saturate them in everything that we did not have growing up.
Yeah.
I think that makes all the difference.
I think that my biggest fear as a father is, like I'm looking at Mia when she's little, and as wonderful as childbirth, is, and you get to hold your baby for the first time and all that.
Yeah,
it's great, but I'm looking at the eyes of my offspring, and I'm thinking, I don't have very much time to instill God in you the way I have experienced Him.
Mm-hmm.
That's such a scary thing to me, I think a lot of parents, I know plenty of great parents. I know plenty of parents that aren't so great. But, I know a lot of Christian parents that, they put, Christ as the center of their home.
Yeah.
And yet their kids backslide. And it's sad. And that's one of my biggest fears. And you have one chance, and that's it. I have a cold, by the way. So anybody hearing me it's not COVID, not quite, but
not cool.
But yeah, but
Omicron.
It's but yeah, it's if you hear me hacking and spitting over here, it's because of that. But it's a scary thing, and now, and you have two children. The twins are. You're gonna have to be teaching them kind of the same thing at the same time. They're going to be learning the ABCs, at the same time, and also learning like scripture and whatever else. But yeah, man, that's a huge weight. I didn't realize was going to be a thing. Is you have to relay the message of who God is, and that's I heard a preacher say one time that a lot of kids will they'll catch it before you'll teach it to them,
Yeah.
And it really is true.
Sounds good.
You have to live it in front of them. And I've seen a lot of ministers that have went back and forth on what they believe. They went back and forth on sometimes what they preach.
Right.
And then their kids got to live through it,
Yeah.
Like Dad didn't live what he preached, or Dad lived what he preached so much that he forgot about us, kind of thing. It's a huge balance. It's a balancing act,
It is. Yeah. It. The one thing I've learned during the season is like, one, it's a opportunity. I had to start learning to use the word opportunity. It's an opportunity to experience God in a different way.
Yeah.
In terms of Him being a provider, because financially, obviously, things are much different.
Yeah.
Excuse me. And then next is I have to, again, reacquaint myself with how to be a husband. And then the new challenges of being a father and, again, like keeping the family unit together.
Right.
Pushing forward and having a vision before their eyes. Even the youngest ones, right? Because like we lay down their foundation.
Yeah.
Like we're their first experience with Christ or the church more specifically too. And so because of that, like it is a huge weight, but it's not really a burden. You know what I mean? It's just it's a responsibility that God like entrusts you with. And I think if people don't recognize that though, you run into a lot of issues.
Sure.
Like I've definitely heard testimonies from, great men of God.
Yeah.
Who said I was a great man of God and I was a horrible father because I was not present, at home. And it really mattered. Well, it doesn't kind of matter. It really matters where you're planted in terms of like a local assembly, because if they're not understanding of like your designated role of being a father, and they, kind of force you or guilt you, or shame you into coming, to be there all the time versus keeping things held together in your own home, then you're not in a good place.
Yeah.
And we don't like to admit that because sometimes things can be like really rocking where we're at. But it's built on the backs of like broken homes.
Yeah.
You know? And so it's just, in the season, it's been learning like, wow, this is another way that God is making me develop the fruit of the Spirit. Because like you think you're patient, but you're not really that patient. Like you're patient underneath the right conditions. You know, kindness, you know, gentleness, like things that I've already struggled with to some degree are now put on top of the most innocent bodies like you could have. You know what I mean? They can't reason with you. They can't talk with you. You know, they can't explain themselves. You can't tell them what to do. Like you're 100% capable of destroying them right then and there.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And they're totally at your mercy. And so whatever you're displaying, like that's what they're getting. And then you got to just think about like when their earliest memories come about. It's like, you're right. Like your kids are going to see everything that you do. And they're going to, every time you preach, you know, I try to think of things in this context now, like what bears witness for me, and what bears witness against me. And as I've heard over the years, the people you want to look at when, you know, a man or woman of God is preaching, giving the word, or anything like that, ministering, is look at their spouse, look at their kids. How are they reacting to what their parent or their spouse is doing? That is a good indicator of who this person really is outside of the spotlight.
Yeah.
And so, you know, I can't be perfect, but at least I want to be consistent before, you know, all of them.
Yeah.
And having in the twins a boy and a girl, I know that, like you said, foundationally there's a lot of things that'll be the same. There's some things that'll be different though. And trying to make the things that I give them come from a biblical place. You know, you already have a daughter, so like, you know what I'm talking about in terms of how you would handle giving her, you know, a definition of holiness versus your son, you know, as he gets older, and trying not to be unjust or unbalanced in how you give that thing, you know, not giving him more leeway than you would give her, or not being so strict and you know, heavy-handed on her that she's not doing things out of the unction of the Holy Spirit to pull away from situations.
Right.
It's the fear of my dad, kind of thing. And one day that goes away, you know what I mean? And they can just run headlong into whatever. So, yeah, 3 kids now. It's different. It's different, but I think it amplifies an emphasis, like, to me and to anybody who has kids. You know, this is like God entrusting you with something, and you have to treat it like it's a level of stewardship that you're going to be forced to hold account for. So, like, take it with fear and trembling. Don't just take it like lightly. I mean, you can have as many kids as you want, but it's as many witnesses against you as you could possibly take.
I mean, your pastor has what, 6 kids?
6 currently. So put an asterisk.
Is that including
Landon?
Landon?
Yeah.
Okay. I didn't know if it's 7 counting him or not. Yeah. I couldn't imagine having 6 kids.
You don't gotta imagine. You just do it. You have them.
Yeah. You just have them. You don't think about it. Man, oh man. Well, I'm really glad you're here, by the way.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
I've been looking forward to having you here for a while, obviously, since you were my first guest I was supposed to have. But
no disrespect to other guys.
But I'm really glad you're here. I was thinking about like
Tom
today.
Brady's back.
Yeah.
You had your chance, boys. All right.
No, we met mutually through my wife.
Yep.
They used to work at Wells Fargo. Your wife and my wife, and they used to. I guess you guys met around the same time that me and her met, right?
Yeah, pretty similarly.
Yeah.
About 6 years ago.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, if that makes sense. Yeah,
And then we got engaged almost at the same time.
I think so.
I think it was pretty close.
Yeah, kind of close.
I just remember
you were ahead. I think you were ahead.
Yeah, I just remember we got engaged first, and then Liz was like, "I have to do something quickly because if I don't, I won't have anything to brag about." No, I'm just kidding.
Could be. Times change. She's matured a lot.
No,
She's not going to listen to this. It's 7:01. Finger guns.
Bam. But no, they were real close friends, and or still are. But no, and then I think we got married pretty close to each other too. I mean, our timelines of like all this stuff happening, it's all happened pretty close to each other. Is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Because we had Mia like right out the gate.
Right.
And I don't know if you had
No, we had like
you had a year, right? Yeah.
Year
Yeah. So you guys had some time. We messed that one up.
Well, she's a blessing.
Yeah.
This guy's talking like if he could do it again. Mia, we love you.
We love you.
And as you hear this when you get older, your dad's a different man now, a better man. Not this Dr. Pepper drinking Yahoo.
I mean, we love her to death. I mean, we just weren't expecting to have one so quickly, but
Yeah.
Anyway, it is what it is now.
Right.
I always joke with my mom because I was born, I think, 16 years after my sister, something like that, 15, 16 years. So every time we and my mom, we talk about me, I'm like, yeah.
You're a Jurassic Park.
I was a mistake.
Oh, yeah.
I know it.
Like a revamp of Jurassic Park or something like that. It's like 20 years later on the dot.
Yeah. I am the reboot of this whole franchise.
That's right. Back with what you already know, what you've loved. It's time for Brandon Holly.
Time to wreck some worlds.
That's right.
And planets. Speaking of wrecking worlds and planets, did you see You saw the Batman, right?
I did not.
You
see
did
the
not see
Batman.
it, man.
No.
I was hoping you'd saw it because I was going to ask you about it.
You asked me like 2 days ago.
That's right. I keep forgetting. I can't even keep track. What did we see together? We saw something together. Was it Spider-Man?
Yes. Yeah, we were in the same theater at the same time.
No Way Home. That's what we saw together.
Yeah.
Yeah. What'd you think of that?
I mean, it's been out now for a while, so it's one of the greatest movies ever, for sure.
Oh yeah, it's so good. So
like,
good.
I hate to leave it like so vaguely, but I mean, it's like if you haven't seen it,
If you haven't seen it, whatever. We're talking spoilers here.
Very sorry.
This is a spoiler warning, so if you haven't seen the movie, just
no. I mean, I'm glad they've introduced the topic of the multiverse, but that actually it brings in a greater thing just because of all the stuff that's like currently going on with like Disney.
Yeah.
So, as a person who like really loved Marvel and comic books, and I really didn't read a lot of comic books, but just the characters, loved the characters, and all those things. Like it's like disheartening to see the things going on now, especially totally. Having, the values that we have as Christians. It's like this is kind of the end of the line. So that could have been the last like Marvel movie I ended up seeing, which was it's a great, place to stop. But a very, unfortunate thing at the same time. But it's no sacrifice at all, you know what I mean, to uphold what we believe. So if you don't know like what we're talking about, just look into the things that, some Disney execs have said about their desire for the future of characters, of storylines, things like that, that just are very heavy on the sexual immorality side of things. And eventually it'll be pushed towards what they call minor attraction, aka pedophilia. So it's like we're not too far off from those things being propagated by the same company who is trying to now, at one point putting things in the undertones of, or maybe last second characters, like in Star Wars, you know what I mean? It's like there's the same sex kiss, like very towards like the very end of the movie kind of thing. So you go through the whole movie and then there's, okay. And then Eternals, you having like a openly gay character and all that. And so it's like it for everything else that's in there that is unsavory in terms of now like elements of witchcraft being put in there, very dark elements being put in there.
Yeah.
It's like it's really time to kind of draw a line on some things.
Yeah.
And it's interesting, right? Because it's stuff that we like grew up on, it was a part of us, but in the way of like that's a part of our old man. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
It's just stuff that's like nourishing to the flesh, but
Yeah.
it's not a spiritual help or aid at all. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So for everybody who is like listening or will catch this, it's like this is now the place that I'm at with it. For a couple weeks, I've already been kind of really resigned from like a lot of things in terms of entertainment because I just spent way too much time, you know, with video games and series and stuff like that, just over the years. Until one day it was just like when I was at IHOP a couple weeks ago, like a heart prick where it's like, you know, for me to see what I know God wants to do in my life, I have to spend that kind of time with him, sort of thing. So, you know, entertainment has to go on the altar and burn up, unfortunately, a lot of it. So hate to like blanket the conversation with that.
No, it's sad. Bob Chapek's the current CEO of Disney. And he has turned the tables so hard on this. Well, I mean, I don't know. Maybe it's not him, but I from what I know of Bob Chapek, he's done a pretty terrible job of being CEO. You know, they were under a guy named Bob Iger who had been there for like 20 something years, I think, and he had a lot of integrity. But Bob Chapek is he's more of a financial guy than an integrity kind of guy. And a lot of the people there, they don't really like him. And I think that he probably won't be CEO for very much longer, more than likely. His contract's up in 2023, but this has happened under his watch. This whole deal with, what was the most recent thing? It was something about gender equality. They were trying to...
Yeah, well, it's probably just the fight against, like, Governor DeSantis. You know,
because they were trying to take all the like ladies and gentlemen. It's not going to be a thing no more. They can't ever say that in the parks or Disney.
A lot of things in response to that.
And also there was one other one, boys and girls. They can't say boys and girls.
Right.
There's no gender distinction anymore, which is I really just don't get it. I'm like, why? So now they're going to be addressing everyone by just saying, I can't remember the exact phrase, but they put a phrase out there. And it's just bogus, man. It's retarded. I mean, I don't understand why this has become such a thing that where our nation has become fixated on gender. I mean, I know in 2020, you know, with the whole George Floyd deal, you know, we got asphyxiated on racism for a while, race, and now it's turned back to gender, and it's like it's just this ongoing slippery slope that we keep going down as a country, and it's not leading to a good destination.
Well, I think all of it has a purpose, though. You know,
sure.
I honestly believe like the intention of all these things is to be a heart revelator. You know, not specifically speaking of like the destiny of this nation, but I mean just on an individual level. You know, people can't help but have opinions, right?
Yeah.
Opinions towards these things. We're compelled by it because it's controversy, and there's enough controversy in the air, whether it's you know, ideas of government or again these particular ideologies, that has caused everyone to like the middle ground is gone. That's the best way to put it.
Yeah. There's no gray area anymore. It's just
there's not
right or left or
I mean, well, even beyond just like right or left, you know, people are coming to, even people who are not saved are starting to have a conviction about themselves to say, you know, at first I didn't mind XYZ,
sure, but
now I see it so heavily, like there has to be something going on here behind the scenes.
Yeah.
So, you know, like I feel like God's just waking people up and making them choose their side. You know, if you think about just like the exchanges between, you know, Pharaoh and Moses, it talks about God hardening like the heart of Pharaoh.
Yeah.
And so it's not like God was making it where it's impossible for Pharaoh to relent and let, you know, the Hebrews go. It wasn't that.
Right.
It was that God was allowing him to go deeper into what his heart already felt. kind of thing, until he finally hit his breaking point. And even then, you see he still chased after them as they're going through the Red Sea. So it was like, we'll see moments where it may seem like, the world is going to back off some things, but they're going to come back to try to get vengeance. You know what I mean? And it takes a God act in order to put a stop to that, because those people are defenseless.
Yeah.
We are sent out, as lambs, like amongst wolves. So we're in the same position. We are not a militant people group, Christians.
Not at all.
So the ways that we fight back against these things is very different. But a big part of that is trying to be an example, and being, if the world doesn't have integrity, we 100% need to have integrity. It's a requirement for us to live out the things that we talk about.
The most that I've ever seen the church since I've been alive, in my lifetime, that has like really how do I say this? Like, I've never seen the church rise up with anger, like a righteously indignant kind of anger, than when Trump was in office. Never.
See, and that's interesting too, because we have to kind of make a distinction if it's just like religious fervor or if it is righteous anger.
Yeah.
Because what I did notice at the time was a lot of people were swept away in more of a right-wing stance versus, there was very little clarity of like what is heaven saying?
Yeah.
Like, what does God want to do with this time? These 4 years that we had, because for a lot of people, they were carrying on as if like the day, if Trump loses, it's all over with, kind of thing.
The world's ending.
Yeah, so it's like, well, what is your responsibility then? You know what I mean? Like, what is God's purpose for you and your local assembly in the region? Like, if this is all so dependent on one man who is fallible, then we didn't have it right in the first place. Yeah. So, I would say there were other like small moments of controversy. I don't know if you remember like the Starbucks cup thing. Yeah, like right. Years ago, taking away Christmas. It just seems like there's like these little small things that people would get a hold on. Outside of abortion, there was no, until Trump came around, I didn't see a thing. Abortion and gay marriage are the two things that I saw people who identified as Christian, who identified as like conservative. Sometimes we have to make sure like there's not a complete merging of the two things. Just because you're a conservative does not mean you're a Christian. Right. Like you being a Christian has its own identity versus your your personal like political beliefs. But your Christianity can, of course, should be influencing your political beliefs and choices, and therefore, it should always be the dominant thing. Christ should always be dominant. The things he said, the things he taught, what's in the Word, should always be dominant, and then lesser than below that should be a subset that's created from that thing. But yeah, you're right. That was the most outspoken I've seen the American church as well, but there also was a pullback too, right? Like there was some more division due to the things concerning George Floyd's death and the many other. So like those protests and the protests that turned into riots like around the world, but more specifically in America, had really once again put people in the hot seat to kind of reveal their hearts, so to speak. And so I just think that maybe we have an issue with like finishing things or continuing in things, So it's like now that Trump's out of office, a lot of people have just kind of laid down. Yeah. You know what I mean? They grumble and complain, but they're not doing anything. You know what I mean? They're not participating in elections because that's just one way that we can do things. And I mean, there's elections coming up, obviously, but they've kind of withdrawn from the process. But I mean, it's like, how much are you interceding in these situations? Because I mean, if something means something to you, if it's really a burden, then your response is going to be tears and intercession. Yep. You're going to find yourself in a place of prayer. You're going to find out the names of the people who you need to be praying for, or the things that you need to be praying against, and you stand in the wall and you stand in your post. But there's a lot of spectators in that. And I really am curious what God's version or God's view is of the church in America at the moment.
Yeah. Yeah, because I think we, man, my throat's all jacked up. I think we definitely had we made some headway during that time. Because I think, honestly, I think some people got their fervor back during that time, and they saw that there is hope, for this country. But then on the other side, I think there were some people that lost hope.
Yeah. Well, that's the problem. If you trust in, horses, chariots, and the governments of man, they'll always fail you. And you're cursed if you put your trust in man in that way. And that's what I meant by like having to decouple your religious identity versus your political identity. Because we also saw a lot of people going into the undergrounds, the tunnels, and the deep places of Q. You know what I mean? There was a lot of things like that were passed off as prophetic words that had nothing to do with Jesus whatsoever. These things were not God speaking. These were the creations and fallacies of people, role playing, intelligence, figures and people high in government.
Yeah.
And you had some saints, unfortunately, not having the discernment to know what this is. You know what I mean? Just not having the practical tools to be able to figure out this is garbage.
Yeah.
But it just showed where the hope was. Again, it's like a heart revelator. Wanting it so bad that you'll believe anything to have it come to pass.
Yeah.
And, so even as a person who's a part of that, I hate saying things like this, a person who's a part of the, prophetic community, like seeing the black eye that it's received, and even the voices and people who are actively saying things that God did not say, and continuing to double and triple down and quadruple down, and then have no sense of accountability towards those things. It was disheartening.
Yeah.
But you know what? God still speaks. He's still speaking through, his servants, the prophets. Scripture tells us that he does nothing in the earth before, giving that download revelation out to them. And so, like last Thursday, we have intercession at our church at about like 6:30. And so during that time, there was a lot of prayer going on specifically for our state and, the nation. And it was very good. It was very God-led. It was very powerful. It wasn't just like, politically minded and spirited and like, we say anything, we believe anything kind of thing. Like, no, it was very God-led and ordained. But the one thing that he showed me during that time was, his prophets sticking cotton balls in their mouth. And the cotton balls were a representation of people trying to soften their words so that the people could receive it, as if to like try to ease back into the good graces. Or to just not be seen as controversial.
Yeah.
Giving very vague fortune cookie like stuff. And so, if you keep stuff in your mouth with something, you get to a point where you're not able to speak anymore. You're not able to communicate effectively. And so that's what he was showing me. And so what I believe is also the other part of that was a showing of Numbers 23, which had to do with, Balak and Balaam. And that's the story where, Balak goes to Balaam and says, hey, you need, or some people call him Balaam, I want you to curse the children of Israel. And he commissions them to do this, and 3 times he goes to curse them, 3 times he ends up blessing them. Now, this is not a man of God by any means, but he can't hear the voice of God. And so, again, it kind of comes back to that point of like people starting to wake up and realize like something's not right here. They have something that's gripping them that is beyond themselves. And, Balaam goes on to the point to say, I can only say what the Lord says. I can only do what he tells me to do, sort of thing. Back to Balak, it's like, hey, bro, we had an agreement. Like, you're supposed to be cursed my enemies. 3 times you blessed them, But yeah, like if the church is not going to do what God wants us to do, if the voices that he's raised up refuse to speak, then he's going to find new voices.
Right.
He's going to get his word out even through secular folks. And we're seeing that in some ways. Some of the biggest figures out there now are standing against things that are pretty much unrighteous. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But they're secular media heads.
Right.
And they have the most influence. And so therefore, like the most authority in terms of like the power of the air.
Yeah. There's a lot of voices, I guess you could say,
Mm-hmm.
that are saying things I thought they'd never say.
That's
you
what
got people like
yeah.
Kanye, people
Mm-hmm.
like Bieber, Trump. Is obviously one of them.
Right.
You got to take some of what they're saying with a grain of salt, but at the same time, it's like, did God raise these people up to say these things?
Right. Yeah. Don't buy into everything they're saying, just like you said.
Yeah.
Because there's going to be some crazy in there too.
Sure.
They're still very worldly folks.
But if God used a donkey,
Yes.
he can use them.
Yep. And that's the point.
Yeah. I think that God can use anybody he wants. He's God, so he can use whoever he wants. I don't like all of Kanye's music, but I like some of the stuff that Kanye's saying. I'm like, that audience needs to hear that.
Yeah. And so that also kind of brings me like back to that particular passage in Numbers 23 and 24, like as it continues. He ends up being used later on to like seduce, like the children of Israel. Is like, all right, here's what you do. Like you sneak some women into their camp. You know what I'm saying? They can't resist. It'll throw them off track. They'll end up worshiping like their foreign gods. So like we have to be careful to understand the season in which someone's being used by God, and then when that ends, to be able to discern that point out. So that way we're not just blindly following them because we're looking for the voice of God. You know what I mean? You have to know when the anointing's lifted off of a particular person or a thing in that. And, it's interesting that you bring up Kanye because I was actually thinking about him like a lot, like maybe 2 days ago. So I listened to a podcast called Southside Rabbi with KB, who's a Christian rapper, and a gentleman named Amin Hudson. And so they had an episode that was dedicated to a Netflix documentary that came out called Genius. So this was about Kanye West and his life, and kind of like these were recordings of him before he ever made it.
Right. Yeah.
As a rapper.
It's like in studio.
Yeah, fashion icon. Yeah. Everything. Right. These are home videos, like from one of his best friends. And you can, in that, you can see the morph of him. I haven't seen it myself, but just their description let me know. Like, you can see the morphing of Kanye into, like,
the persona.
Yeah, the unraveling, should I say, maybe. Yeah. Like, he's always been this person now, but just like the tortured soul kind of thing.
Sure.
So it was very interesting to see him making moves to come towards Christ, or at least we can perceive it to be that way. You know what I mean? But what I was actually thinking about is something that maybe we can discuss is like the fact that, him, Bieber, and many others over time who have, Chance the Rapper, who have started to, name the name of Christ, like what it would be like to be underneath the level of pressure and temptations that they have, because there's some difficulty. And now I don't know what it's like for you, but just in like the small scale of things that I've dealt with in life, those things are hard.
Yeah.
But I can't imagine actually having like pretty much uninhibited access to whatever you want.
And having an audience.
Yes. Yeah. And having an audience on top of it.
Because they're watching you. And if you go that route,
they're going with you. Yeah. So you have just nothing but echo chambers like built in of people saying, yes, like go ahead and do that.
And some people are rooting for these people to fail. Like there's a lot of people that wanted Trump to fail. And I'm not talking about Democrats. I'm talking about like good people.
Yeah.
They wanted him to fail. Just like Bieber and Kanye. I know of people that wanted them to fail, not because they think, Kanye's music's bad. No, it's because some people can't see the fact that God has a plan for someone.
Right.
Even if it's like, I don't get it. It's like, This dude talks about smoking weed in one song, and then the next song he's talking about Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I get it. Carrie Underwood, wrote "Jesus Take the Wheel," and the very next song she was talking about getting drunk.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, I get it, but at the same time, God does what He does, and He has a purpose in whatever He does.
Yeah.
And we just have to be okay with that,
Right.
Like, it doesn't mean those people are right.
Mm-hmm.
God never said that.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not saying that either. But I mean, like, for me, when I look at the Bible and I look at like all the characters, like, let's just say like, there was an instance where, was it Moses got drunk?
Noah.
Noah. What am I thinking? No, that's like,
That's
what's
all right.
wrong with me?
Right
so
after the flood.
Right after the flood. And it's like, so, I mean,
Noah-
it can happen to anybody.
Yeah, Noah's described as a preacher of righteousness.
And it doesn't matter that Noah did that. God used him after the fact too.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, he was God's man for the time.
Yeah.
And he didn't screw it up.
Mm-hmm.
God knew he was going to do that.
Mm-hmm.
He called him anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Just like with Kanye. I mean, Kanye has done some outrageous stuff. I mean, like some crazy stuff.
Yeah.
Like, this dude needs to be in the nut house.
Yeah.
But at the same time, sometimes it takes someone just like that
Mm-hmm.
to be so outrageous that God, uses them.
Well, it's definitely interesting, the idea, the prospect of what it would be like if God got a hold of somebody like that.
Yeah.
And so, in evangelistic terms, like what I call it is like big game hunting. Like, that kind of, that also lends to something else though, like to be the minister or pastor, evangelist or whatever around them, being subjected to that environment. I mean, we see some of the controversies that have happened with like Hillsong and some other places, concerning like, their interactions with like Justin Bieber and scandals and stuff outside of that. But just being that close to someone who's practically a god and trying to tell them you're not,
Right.
you're not. I know you have pretty much unlimited money. You could tell anybody to do anything and they'll pretty much do it, kind of thing. But there's a person that's higher than you. Mm-hmm. His name is Jesus, and he's not physically here, and yet you still have to submit to him.
Exactly.
Kind of thing.
Yeah.
Like, like having all those years of not serving God and being in atheism is still not the same as just being, maybe completely unpenetrated by the truth, because they're in these circles in which like Christians have pulled away from so hard, I'm not saying like, well, I'm saying we need to integrate in a very holy and fearful way into these spaces and places. Christians definitely need to be in tech. Christians definitely need to be in the arts and entertainments. Christians definitely need to be in medicine. Like a lot of the things that we're seeing is the result of a pullback, that probably started back in the 80s, 90s, 70s, somewhere in that time frame to where everybody was just thinking every 10 seconds, like we're about to get raptured.
Right.
So we're not going to even try to, what's the point of you going to college? You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
You're not going to be here. 1999.
That's such an old way of thinking, but yeah. It's so true.
But, we're living that. We're living that now. So, like, each generation is living the world that was created by the one before it.
Yeah. I was just talking to, it wasn't you, I was talking to someone else today. It was a pastor.
Mm-hmm.
And he said the generation that came before my generation, he's a little bit older, and he was just talking about, how they were in the war and, all that kind of stuff. And I'm thinking, man, that was like 50 years ago, 60 years ago now.
Did he say
even longer than that?
Did he mean like engaged in wars or
they were
like into wars?
I think, okay, so he's 60.
Mm-hmm.
So what war would his parents would have been in?
If he was 60, and his
That would have
parents
been
could have been World War II.
Yeah, it might have been World War II.
World War II. He's seeing Vietnam, possibly.
So
maybe a little bit younger.
And we were talking about that, how childhood was kind of messed up because of the war that was going on. His dad had to leave, whatever.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking like, my parents never saw any war.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we had the Iraq War, back in
Right.
the early 2000s, but
You saw that too, technically.
my dad never went to that.
Yeah.
And but when I look across the generation, like I guess I would be considered a millennial.
Mm-hmm.
When I look at all of our parents,
Yeah.
they're all jacked up. I mean, like they didn't go to war, but it's the sin of man.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter if you're in war or not. Like, it will literally wreck your life. Like, people, in my generation, like, these are some of the most messed up kids I have seen. Like, 'cause I'm 30, and when I was a teenager, like, these kids were lost. Like, all these kids were so lost. I didn't know who they were. And that, and that goes back to our, whole thing with Disney is like, they're trying to, do all these gender laws and stuff. And it's like, this is just a loss of identity across the board. And, when it comes to my kids, it just goes back to another thing, you got kids the same age as mine, but we have to make sure that they have an identity, outside of even who I am. Because I can teach them all day, about who they need to be, but they're gonna form it to be who they are, and they're gonna have to practice it out there in that world. And if what I have gave them doesn't hold up out there in that world, and it collapses on them, they're gonna blame me,
right?
Because I didn't make God real enough to them to make sure that it holds up out there in front of our society that they're going out into.
Yeah,
and
that's a good point.
Like our identity problem that we've had over the past several years, is now I don't know. My parents particularly were older. I mean, my mom was 35, 36 years old when she had me.
Yeah.
So by the time I came along, my mom was she was older. So they had already seen, a lot of life, it's not like she was 18, and just freshly out of high school or something.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, it's insane to me to go from that, knowing that my parents were the way they were.
Mm-hmm.
Like, for anybody that doesn't know, like, my dad walked out on my mom. My mom basically, abandoned me. And, my grandparents ended up having to take me in. And once my grandparents took me in, my life totally changed. But I was raised by a totally different generation.
Right. And people into different things.
Yeah, and people into totally different things.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing is these kids that are being raised right now, like by us, oh my God.
Yeah, and not to, because you're flowing in a very good place. Not to interrupt that, but just the fact that what we're instilling in our kids is controversial now.
Yeah,
but it is world breaking. It'll be world breaking for them.
It will break. Yeah.
If they
totally.
don't, if they are not in line with it, and I mean, our window is so small. This is why a lot of people are going back to homeschooling.
Yeah.
Because of what is going on in the educational realm. Our window is so small to pour into them. And I seen this. This is something that I can remember just from working, in my time in Kojic, in the youth department, is that the only Bible, the only prayer, the only time of anything like that being brought before them was on that Sunday night, if they were made to come, or Wednesday, for Bible study. That was it. And I see, because of seeing that, I know it is imperative, that my kids get, the experience and the tutelage from me in terms of seeing me actively pray, actively read the word, loving my wife, loving them, ministering whenever they see me ministering, singing part of the worship team and stuff like that. Like that they get to see that, but they also get to experience that at home.
Yeah.
So that the only time they're getting that, forbidding that the only time they get that would be at church whenever they're there.
Correct.
Because, as I've seen it, and it's like for athletics have just ravaged a lot of kids' spiritual lives.
Totally.
Because parents were okay with, like, they can attend everything, every practice, every game, everything had priority over them. So, like, if that was their one opportunity to get the word, then they missed it. They missed it because they weren't there.
Yeah.
So, yeah, like, everything that we're instilling now, it has to be true because it's going to be tested so hard.
Yeah.
They're
coming up against a world that me and you will never understand.
Exactly.
Like, their high school is going to be so full of garbage ideologies that if they don't have a very firm foundation of what they believe, who they are, they're going to walk into that crap storm and not know what to do.
Yeah.
And it's
or they'll turn on you.
Yeah, or they'll turn on me. And I don't want to see that. I don't want Mia or Ian to ever come home with questions like, gender questions.
Yeah, why did you teach me this when my teacher,
like,
who you told me to listen to, says this?
Yeah, or why do you listen to so-and-so all the time, like Ben Shapiro or something all the time? They're wrong. Or they're teaching some kind of false, whatever. And it's like, I get it. Like, these teachers, I guess some of them are being told what they have to teach. And I don't guess they have to teach it, but, I guess they'll get fired if they don't. But I just can't imagine a world where, they're indoctrinating our children. I
mean, it's happening now.
It is, yeah.
The truth is, like, being in a world where it's hopeless against that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so it could be for the church, and what I'm speaking of this particularly is like the American church, to try to figure something out. I know it's not totally a monolith. Every local assembly is doing their own thing, but it's obviously most important that we are hearing from God for a particular region and what to do. And Pastor Ned had a dream that was very interesting some years ago, talking about God defining more and more sheep and goat nations, and states, even within our own, United States. So yeah, we're seeing that play out. I think we started seeing that play out a little bit during the vid, because I don't want to tag to be thrown up on the video, of what particular states will do, and then it matters what state you're in.
Yeah.
Whereas before you were where you were and you traveled to someplace else. Well, when they tell you can't travel, when they tell you you can't do this, that, and the other, if you live just a couple miles away from the other state and the other state can do it, it's a problem.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's just, again, it's a reflection of what's in people's hearts. It's a flexing of what people believe, what people think, and how violently, like, they will put that out. So in terms of our kids, like, their hearts and minds are so tender and sensitive, that it is important that we guard it,
totally.
as parents. Like, it's 100% our responsibility to do that.
Yeah.
Because the moment if they go into public school, without legislation, bills, and things like that, there are certain things they could be exposed to that will make them question you before they're even able to spell their name correctly. You know what I mean? And so it gets dangerous very quickly because they spend more time at school than they do at home.
Yeah.
Like, quite literally, in terms of hours of the day, especially if we have to work.
And that's the reason why churches have such an uphill battle.
Yeah.
They're spending 8 hours a day at school, and then they're spending 2 hours a week at church. And we're putting so much responsibility on these churches to teach our children what we should be teaching them in our homes.
Yep.
And that's the reason why we're having such a exodus of, people out of church. It's because they're growing up, with 2 hours worth of church a week, and they're getting indoctrinated by our world out there.
Yeah.
And our parents aren't doing anything about it.
Yeah, and there's also a generational gap that you see like in a lot of churches.
Oh yeah.
Where it's like there's a lot of older saints,
Mm-hmm.
you know.
Yeah.
There's not really like a lot of 30-somethings.
Yep.
30-somethings, 40-somethings. You're lucky if you have some youth in your church too.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? For our church, it's vibrant in the youth because we have a lot of young adults and whatnot. Not a larger group of older saints, but obviously we need them. They're very important. But it's just to say, like, every church mix is different, but I think predominantly there is a big gap.
Yeah.
In terms of that group that should be taking the baton, now.
I think that in my experience, the churches that I have seen that have the most diverse crowd as far as the age groups are specifically churches that put a emphasis on the move of the Spirit.
That's good, yeah.
Some of those churches, because I've been to a lot of them, I've traveled all over the country, been with evangelists. My pastor was a evangelist that traveled every week, and we traveled for sometimes months at a time and didn't come home. And I traveled with him quite a bit. And one of the things that I noticed was when we would go to some of these churches that I would see teenagers in the altars. I'd see middle-aged people in the altars. I'd see older people in the altars. I'd see elderly people in the altars, and even children. But the reason why they were showing up to these events that he was preaching was not because he was the guy. They were showing up because he knew the guy, and he was putting an emphasis on that guy. And I mean, it's just like let's just say, for instance, I have nothing against Kevin Wallace. I think Kevin Wallace is fantastic as far as a preacher. I love Stephen Furtick. I think he's a good guy. I don't know him personally, but I've been to his church, and he's got great people that go there. But when you look at people like that, and these big churches get those people, and they have revival nights or encounter nights, or whatever, that's great. That's all good. But the problem that I have with it is every Sunday's revival.
Yeah.
It's like, why are we having revival nights when every Sunday's revival? I mean, I get it. I know what the shtick is. I get it. But, for me, it's like I grew up in a church that put such an emphasis on if God does not move in this service with all of our regular people here, like the pastor that we've heard 1,000 times preach, he's probably going to preach a recycled message more than likely. And that's not a bad throw off on him. But it's like, we've heard everything he's preached.
We know what to expect.
We know what to expect.
We know what to expect from man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, and the worship team's going to get up there and sing the same 4 songs we've been singing for the last 4 months because they're popular, whatever. But it's not about that. It's about getting in a room together and worshiping God in a way that honors him, that makes him want to come down here and dwell among us.
Exactly.
And if you ever can find a people group that know how to do that and honor God in that way, you will draw every age group and every race.
Right.
Because I've seen it. I've seen it happen. And that's the biggest problem that I have with a lot of churches these days. They're saying, well, we don't have any Asian people come to our church. We don't have any black people come to our church. Well, part of that could be where they are.
Yeah, demographic.
It could be that, you're in there's not a lot of, like, for instance, here in churches like in Destin or in Fort Walton, you don't have like a huge black population here. You do. I mean, you have a few, but most of the people here are Caribbean or or Hispanic or whatever.
Yeah.
So you can expect a lot of them, but it's like, these churches that are looking for these people groups, age groups, whatever. You have to let God send you who's going to send you, but at the same time, you have to just put an emphasis on what God puts emphasis on.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't really care if you sing 3 hymnals and have a 30-minute message and a 5-minute altar call. But if you take the elements that you're good at, like let's just say your church is really good at worship, and you give it everything that you have, and then your pastor gets up there and gives it everything. That's all you can ask for. Yeah, give it everything that you got. Right. And if God moves, he moves. But I mean, the type of church that I came from, that's what we did. We just gave it everything that we got, and we had just insane results. I mean, don't get me wrong, I didn't run a 1,000-member church, but I mean, we saw thousands of people saved.
Right.
You know,
What matters most.
and we were making disciples, which is amazing. And I love like when I talk about like where I came from, I reminisce about it. It almost makes me a little sad in some way because I'm not seeing that now.
Yeah.
A lot of the churches that I'm going to, they have a shtick and they're sticking to it. It's not working.
Right.
And it sucks because it needs. They need to work.
Right.
These churches, they need to work. I mean, we were put here, to make disciples, and if we're not doing that, then we're not a New Testament church.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, and that's why it's so necessary to put emphasis on Jesus. The words of Jesus. Yeah. And for that, I actually want to make a little plug. So there's this ministry out in South Africa. It's called Overcomers. And to tell you a little bit about what they do is they're in this small area called Paris. It's like a little small township, right? So it's like smaller than a city. It's nothing close to being like Paris. It's an impoverished area. But the ministry that they have, as long as we've been connected with them just over the last couple of years, has really exploded, like in terms of number and in terms of like growth. But their model is very simple. We're going to feed people spiritually and naturally, and when you're in an area like that, that's what you have to do, because if you have an empty stomach, you're not listening to much, besides your own belly rumbling. And it's not cookies, you know what I'm saying? You're hungry, like you're quite literally hungry.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, as I've been watching and observing the ministry, I've been learning a lot from it. They also do these wisdom sessions like every single day. Well, pretty often, in which, again, it's all Bible based. It's coming predominantly from the words of Jesus and has very practical application. And so, we could all take note of that. You know what I mean? In areas where they're in extreme hardship due to poverty, to where our dollars go very far. You know what I mean? They're making do with what they have, but they're asking for international help.
Yeah.
And it's like, who do you get help from? You know what I mean? If your champion is out here doing everything else, but gearing up, training up to do what the church is supposed to do. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know if there's a decline in evangelists. You know what I mean? Like, because it's not popular anymore.
Right.
Not in the way that it used to be.
Oh, yeah, you're totally right.
But also because it's a request, like a real evangelist. It's a request to like lay down your life. So I'm not talking about like just like an itinerant minister. Still plenty of people trying to do that because, hey, let's keep it real, like you get paid to talk about God, amazing.
Yeah.
For a lot of people, that's the dream.
It's a dream.
It's a very hard life if you've ever actually like tried to do it, experience it. There's a lot of pain, a lot of disappointment. You can have your heart broken pretty hard by trying to do what God says and come to a place and realize there's a lot of red tape. Kind of like what you were saying before. You don't fit like the mold or model. Like you have the influence, they want the influence, but they don't want the purity of the anointing on your life.
Yeah.
Because that comes from you demonstrating, preaching Christ crucified. And so, yeah, we should be very careful to not minimize Jesus in efforts to reach the world, in efforts to fulfill our marketing campaigns and all those things. Let's not try to hide our light, kind of thing, because the world is going to get continually darker. And the Holy Spirit is just going to have to move someplace else. I want it to be in our church. I don't personally put so much of a emphasis on revival like anymore. I think I was buying into what other people were buying into. I believe that God's going to do revival work in America because I believe he's going to do it, I think, globally. But I do pay very close attention to, the book of Revelation and all the other books that have apocalyptic themes. and recognize like the times and the seasons that we're in. It's important. It should be our utmost, like the thing that should be sitting in the front of our mind, our first thought in the morning, our last thought at the end of the day, especially if you're in ministry or you believe you're called. What are you doing right now to win souls? It should be totally in our minds. It should be burning in our hearts, because people in this world are perishing fast, and some of them are not even getting the opportunity to hear the truth.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? They're stuck to go through our programs and our entertainment, our TED Talks that we're producing in the churches, and it's not spirit led, it's not spirit filled, as you made mention of before. The necessity of the desperation that comes from, like, yes, I know that God is here, but is he moving? Is he doing something?
Right.
Does he feel at liberty to do so?
Mm-hmm.
Because, we're not so mighty that we can usher him out, but he will leave.
Mm-hmm.
And being able to recognize God's terms and conditions for him to come in greater and greater ways. And so, like, even at our church, we've changed like our intercession model, to more of a harp and bowl style. So it's based out of Revelation, concerning the need for prayer through Scripture.
Mm-hmm.
Because we could say a lot of things in prayer and pray amiss, you know what I mean?
Sure.
But if you're praying God's word back to him, it's like you're doing something every time.
Mm-hmm.
And recognizing like God relates to you in two ways. He relates to you in terms of prayer and his own word. That's you speaking to him. That's him speaking back to you. And just how solid that is. But also an emphasis on, the fear of the Lord, purity, in terms of holiness, and doing the work in terms of true reverential worship.
Mm-hmm.
Everything being vertical.
Yeah.
And it's not as attractive as other things, but it's God. It's God's way. And God does pull people in through it, I know this is about Jesus being put on the cross, where he says, if I be lifted up, I'll draw all men unto me.
Sure.
But it's also true that if he is lifted up, then he's doing the work of breaking chains. He's doing the work of healing hearts. He's doing the work of removing shame and guilt and everything that he was anointed to do in terms of his earthly ministry. Now he gave us that thing in a greater measure. So we have to be committed to doing that, and again, to plug that ministry out in Africa, I'd like to share the website if that's okay with you.
Yeah, go ahead.
Just to tell you like where people can go to partner with them, because, again, your money goes very far there, whether it be the US dollar or anything else that you have, because at least in terms of ministries currently, like, it's what I see as one of the purest things. So one way that you can reach out to them would be through edcc.africa. So by going on their website, their goal is to raise leaders who raise leaders, to teach them the commandments of Christ, and to get them filled with the Spirit so that they may produce the fruit of the Spirit. So that's a big part of what they do. Again, you can find them on Facebook at EDCC Everyday Children's Church as one page, and Overcomers Wisdom Sessions on another page. So you can see myself there, and a lot of other people from this particular area there learning, and just, it's honestly a way.
What's the name of the website again?
Yeah, so EDCC.
EDCC.
Mm-hmm.
Dot what?
Dot Africa.
Africa. I'm so blind. God, I can't see. All right, let's see. Let's pull this mug up.
Yeah. That way you awesome listeners who keep money in your mattress because you don't trust the government. And all you Bitcoiners, you got a place to put some of that extra dough in a place that's relevant and amazing.
This thing's being slow.
Well,
maybe it may just be the website. But here we go.
Yeah, while that loads up, there's actually a testimonial I gathered from a local pastor here named Christy Merriman.
Is this it right here?
It is it right there. Yeah. Yep. And so prayerfully, people check that out. There's many different ways to partner with them, but also you get to see, if you spend time going through their website, you get to see what they're actually doing with it. It's great to know that when you're giving money, it's actually doing something.
Sure.
100%. It's not. See, the problem is in that particular region is if you try to sign up to be a nonprofit organization and the government has grants to give you money, you know what happens? What happens is those politicians find out about the grants and they call up a relative and say, hey, we're about to have so many million rand available.
Yeah.
And I know you need it. And you know I need it.
Mm-hmm.
So they end up creating a nonprofit, you know, it's their family member, and then they persuade everybody else to get on board with giving them money that way.
Mm-hmm.
So they basically pat themselves on the back to this money that could be going towards helping people.
Right.
So they live rich and lavish lives. And
I mean, that's what happens in Haiti.
yes. Yeah. So this happens all over the world. And
I mean, my dad was there for 10 years, and he
wow, I didn't know
they
you said
gave hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Mm-hmm.
And the government would just take it.
Yeah.
I mean, they're living like kings, and people are
Exactly.
starving out there in the streets.
And what happens when you don't have money or resources? You do whatever you can, or you do whatever you feel like you're entitled to do.
I mean, they do the same thing to the food out there too.
Mm-hmm.
Free food, and they're out there selling it to people that can't afford it.
Right.
Yeah.
And so their goal there at Overcomers is they want to feed 14,000 kids a day.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, I've seen some of the kids that have started off there over the course of the years, and now they're actually getting up. You can see them like on the microphone, and they're teaching the word of God. And some of them are much better than some American preachers that I've seen. But just one thing that I wanted to share was from Christy. She says, "I love Overcomers Ministry because it's not just a facet of ministry, but it really is about the whole kingdom. You always hear Christians saying, why doesn't this ministry do this or that? But Overcomers really finds a way to help in all aspects. I love how they really are being the hands and feet. I love the dreams and wisdom sessions because it challenges you in your walk with God and makes you dig deeper into the Word. And I'm so grateful just to be a small part of this ministry." And so, yeah, we have a couple of little groups there where it's like room for intercession and all that. So I just wanted to give that plug because, you know, I believe the BHP is going to be titanic in scope, you know, one day, very soon. And people will take a look at these early episodes and be like, man, that guy had some weird lights. but they had some really good conversations and to see how far it's come.
Yeah.
So,
People ask me, they're like, how much did it cost to get this whole podcasting thing started? And I'm like, man, I spent less than $500 on it. And I mean, I literally have like $11 lights from Walmart lighting this thing up.
Well, let me ask you something. Okay.
Yeah.
So podcasting is emerging as one of the most rapidly growing ideal professions for people, especially, but also in terms of hobbies. So there are millions more than there were just 3-4 years ago. As now an official podcaster, do you have any thoughts about the space, or do you have any thoughts about the space, one? And two, what do you feel is different about being a Christian or a man of God in this very same said space?
So I think that the space is great. I mean, I really think that podcasting it can be very, very, very useful.
Yeah.
As far as getting your message out there.
Yeah.
Being heard, you know, having a unique voice.
Yes, and when I say space for everybody else, it's about, you know, platform, like what type of platform and tool it is.
Right. Yeah. Because I definitely feel like that there's a lot of great ministers out there that are not heard. And they should be putting their sermons out on like Spotify or Apple Podcast or Anchor or something, and just make that your podcast. If you know, if you don't want to have a sit down conversation like, you know, me and you're having, but me specifically, I may upload my own sermons up there at some point. I don't know, maybe on a separate channel or something. But I'm very interested in conversation. Right. And the reason why I'm interested in conversation is because there are people that I know that have something I feel like is great to say, even in casual conversation like this,
Yes.
and they don't have a platform to do it on.
Mhm.
They don't have the money to start a podcast. They don't know how to start a podcast, whatever. And so I feel like it's my obligation to bring those kind of people on and just let them, say what they feel, say what what their vision is for ministry or, whatever.
Yeah.
And get their message out there. But what was the second part of your question?
And the second part of it is, as a man of God, how do you try to navigate this? How do you try to, wield the platform? Because it's, as you said, YouTube, there's a lot of content on YouTube and Facebook, and people are trying to now break into Instagram and TikTok with short videos, short format videos and things like that. But this being something totally different in a lot of ways, people shy away from it because they don't want their actual thoughts out there. Like a sermon is one thing.
Yeah.
It's because it's easier to package, but to talk and to speak into the space and identify, when I say space, again, the times that you're in all of that, to be able to just communicate like what's actually going on through these like long format conversations. Again, as like a man of God, like what is that like? Do you even foresee a time where it may be like difficult to get guests or anything like that?
I think I used to here. Okay, so I'm just gonna give the evolution of myself because
Bring it on.
if you had told me 10 years ago that I was gonna be starting a podcast, I'd have laughed in your face because I was so obsessed.
10 years ago, I'd have punched you.
Yeah. I was so obsessed with keeping this like image and persona of me completely spotless to the point of I don't want anybody to know my opinions about anything. I don't want anybody to know like what I think about like this gender equality deal, whatever. Because I was of the opinion that maybe if they know less about you, they'll accept you better if they get to know you first, and then then they get to hear your opinion. But over the years, I have gotten to know a lot of different ministers, and a lot of different people.
Mm-hmm.
That is not that's not a thing with people anymore.
Yeah,
they judge you by the first two words you say.
That's true. And
they usually, if you make a bad impression, they gaslight you until, you basically give in to, you did say that or you didn't, whatever. But so that necessarily hasn't happened to me. I mean, not to the point of like I've just had a bad time of that. But what has happened to me is I have had people that have judged me from afar and figured me out later.
It's about to get spicy.
Yeah. And so because of that, and I'm talking about ministry people, I'm talking about like pastors, evangelists, like, ministry people that should not do this kind of thing. They take one look at you, judge you, figure you out later. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, if that's the sentiment of people, then I'm just going to let my opinion just glow in the darkness.
Right.
Because my opinion is not outside the Bible.
That's good. So, that actually keeps you in a very safe place.
Yeah. So, if you got a problem with me, you got to take it out with him. Because it's in the Word.
That's right.
And obviously I have opinions on stuff that's probably risque or things that it would be a hot topic that we wouldn't want to cover in church or something like that. Yeah. It's never outside the Bible.
Right.
Because if it's outside the Bible, I don't have an opinion on it. It's like, what's there to have an opinion on? I had a situation here a little while back where I had something happen and I ended up having to just have a confrontation with someone. And they came at me with all this stuff saying, well, you said this, you said that, this is your opinion and that's not right and blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, and? Like, okay,
Yeah.
it's wrong to have an opinion? Because people are hypocritical. They will say that the Christian with an opinion is offensive.
Mm-hmm.
But Joe Rogan can have an opinion that's total opposite of that, or the same,
Mm-hmm.
and they have no problem with it.
Right.
And I'm like, if that's the sentiment of people, I'm going to put my opinion out there. So my perspective of being a man of God and having these kind of sometimes hard conversations,
Mm-hmm.
who better to have it with than someone that is going to keep you on the right path and guide you through these hard to navigate problems, situations,
Mm-hmm.
ideologies. Who better to have it with than someone like me, you, whoever?
Right.
Because we're going to have your best interest in mind. Because like 5 years ago, if you had told me it's like, well, church needs to be like this and that and the other, I probably would have said something totally different than what I would say right now.
Mm-hmm.
But that's a style change. It's not a Bible change.
Right. It's a good way to put it.
Styles change. But you just can't afford to get hung up on it.
Yeah.
And that's what a lot of ministers do is they want a certain style. Kind of like, you came from the Kojic movement. They have a certain style.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't make them right or wrong. I come from a different style than the Kojic movement. I mean, we have elements of that.
Right.
But I mean, there's nothing wrong with having style. But I definitely think that if you stay inside the boundaries of the Bible, then you can make this platform your mega ministry.
Mm-hmm.
You can steer the thoughts and the I guess the hearts of hundreds of thousands of people that you don't know, who
Yeah.
may be going through situations that you are lightly touching upon, and it may guide them through a hard time in their life.
Mm-hmm.
Like I've always said this. I mean, I have literally always said this since I was like 18 years old. But someone asked me one time, they said, why do you want to preach? I feel like you're a better like a musician or, whatever, than you are a preacher. And I say the same thing every time. There's some kid out there that's going to listen to something that I say,
Mm-hmm.
and it is going to change their life forever. And I know that kid because I was that kid at one time. And I had a preacher that swung through my church, and he preached the Bible like it was leaping off the page.
Wow.
And I was never the same after that.
Mm-hmm.
And I have always said that I want to be that for somebody else at some point. I may not be as good as he was, or, I may not have as good of words to say, but God anointed me to bring forth his word, and ever how it comes, I want to be the person that some little boy, little girl, or maybe grown man, grown woman, whatever. I want to be the reason someone gets up and puts their feet on the floor and keeps serving God.
Yeah.
And if this platform can give me that voice, that's what I'm going to use it for.
Yeah. That's inspirational.
Tears.
Do you still do you know what happened to that minister?
I do. He was my pastor.
Okay.
Yeah, he was my pastor. I just talked to him last week.
Mm-hmm.
He's still doing what God's called him to do.
Yeah.
Every time I talk to him, he's getting older now, so his ministry is kind of like settling down a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
I love him to death. He's a great man of God. But I'll never forget that. It was in 2006 when that happened.
Mm-hmm.
And I was 15 years old, and I was sitting on the third row in a Church of God in Opp, Alabama.
Opp.
Yeah.
Great things still happen in Opp.
That's the meth capital of the world, Opp, Alabama. That's what I've been told anyway. And dude, in that revival, there was people that was literally standing outside. We had to open the windows of the church. We had to open the windows of the church, and the sound guy had to turn the speakers as far up as they could go. I mean, he had to just turn them up as loud as they could go, because there was people standing outside of the church. They raised the blinds, and people were standing outside trying to hear what this man was saying.
Huh.
I mean, like that church sat maybe 100 at the most, and there was probably 300 there.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, we had people get healed of all kinds of crazy stuff in that revival. And that revival, I think it only lasted like a week, maybe a week and a half or something like that. But it was one of the most powerful revivals I've ever been in. But I mean, I've seen that man raise the dead.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's been some crazy stuff happen in his ministry.
Yeah.
And I was very grateful to be able to be a part of it when I was younger. But it shaped my whole way of thinking. Because here's the thing about him. He's not the most graceful speaker. He's not even, probably not even like the most qualified speaker. I actually own a book called Qualified by Stephen Furtick. And I read that book, and I kind of had myself in mind when I read it. But that's the thing about him, is he knew that. He knew it.
Mm-hmm.
But he was just like, you called me to do this, and you're going to put the words in my mouth.
Yeah.
And you're going to project it into the generation that I live in. And it's either going to do something or nothing, and that's not up to me.
Mm-hmm.
And his attitude was literally just, I'm going to put an emphasis on the move of the Spirit in such a way that when I leave a place, either it's changed because God moved,
Mm-hmm.
or, it just, I preached, and, we had revival, and that's it. Because he never came with an agenda. That's one thing I learned from him. He never came with an agenda. He just preached whatever God spoke to him. Sometimes he got up and didn't even know what he was going to preach. Because God would just drop it in like a moment he walked up to the pulpit.
Yeah.
And I have such a honor and respect for men that just allow God to use them. And it's, to me, it's kind of sad looking at the landscape of preachers, because I'm not seeing that like I used to.
Mm-hmm.
And in the short time that I've been preaching, I have got up at some churches that have had some elders, and one of the compliments that I've always gotten when I've preached is that that's old time preaching.
Yeah.
And I appreciate that.
It's a great compliment.
It's a great compliment. It really is. It's because there's something so relevant now about what we used to have.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a reason why I say we used to have. It's because it's something that we don't have now. And that is this, lack of, it's like a lack of fervency. It's like people don't, it's like they pray, but they don't pray with the same desperation that they used to pray with.
So you feel like it's a belief issue?
Could be, yeah. I think that there's a lack of a desperation for God to move in such a way that there's no other way to explain it than that God showed up.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times, we want to take credit for it. Man, that worship team did great. Or man, that preacher preached. Or, or man, that sound was awesome today. Whatever. And I mean, I get it. I get it. But it's not our credit to have.
Yeah. Well, as I've heard, like, you have the right quality production and, a good charismatic speaker. You don't need God.
Yeah.
You put on the best show in town.
Yep. Exactly. I mean, I've worked at some very large churches, and we had some great production. I mean, we had some of the best production you'd ever ask for. $100,000 LED walls, $100,000 in audio equipment, $100,000 in video equipment, whatever. And that's all great. I mean, it really is. It's great. I love all of it. But I would rather be sitting in that little Church of God in Opp
Mm-hmm.
with that type of a move of the Spirit with 400 people or 300 people that are that kind of hungry,
Yeah.
than I would be sitting in a 1,000-seat arena with $300,000 of production.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't have that.
Yeah.
Because the hunger, man, the level of hunger is so different now. And that's what I'm desperate for. I mean, that, like, I have found myself, and this is, I know I'm talking a lot here, and this ain't even, like, you're my guest, and I'm doing all the talking.
I asked.
Feel like,
I want you, you're on a thing. You're on a good thing.
but I feel like I have found myself here lately putting on that song Gyra by Maverick and the song Firm Foundation a lot. And I have two reasons for those two songs, those two picks of those two songs. Gyra, because I have found myself getting to a place spiritually to where if I'm not singing that you are enough and I'm pointing that towards heaven,
Yeah.
I feel like everything down here is just chaos.
That's a good way to put it.
I mean, like, my life is, if my listeners knew the hell that I was going through, even in this moment, you would know why I'm singing that song. Mm-hmm. I mean, like, there's a lot of pieces that are moving right now. But here's the thing, is I'm on a firm foundation. And that song says that even when it don't make sense, I can't remember exactly how that song goes, but it basically said, there's a part in it that says, when everything around me is shaking, my life is in your hands, basically. And I'm literally, those two statements are just where I'm at in life right now. And those are the only two songs that I'm juggling in my personal prayer time. It's because I'm desperate to just be touched by God the way I remember being touched in 2006, sitting on that third row at the Op Church of God. And I'm praying to God that, because I've had this word that's been dropped in my spirit for several weeks, months, really. I've been kind of like looking at maybe preaching it and trying to like figure it all out, because it's a big statement. This is a huge statement. And I don't even know if anybody's going to understand what I say or what I mean when I say it. But maybe, Greg, maybe you can bring some light to it. But I have this thought that's been just going through me just over and over and over, and I can't get it out. And that is this very simple statement that I feel like has a mountain of meaning in it. And that is that ministry is ugly. Mm-hmm. And what I mean by that is that we look at ministry as this oasis. It's like, if I get right there, then I'm safe. But you're not.
Right.
You're in the eye of the storm. And it's complete chaos all around you. And the only way that you can survive is by staying in the ugly.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, it's because ministry, as beautiful as it can be, it's only beautiful if it's here. Because if it ever comes here, and what I'm doing right now is I'm like, if you ever point ministry at any direction besides up.
Yeah. Vertical.
Yeah, it's got to be vertical. Because if it's not vertical, then it becomes ugly really fast. Mm-hmm. Because then it becomes man-centered and not God-centered.
Right. And sometimes that transition is very, very subtle.
Yeah.
But you can build entire ministries based on that. So I don't even mean like individual ministries anymore, but like essentially we create these cults.
Yeah.
These
cliques, yeah.
Yeah, cults and cliques that seem to embody our idea of what ministry is supposed to be. Mm-hmm. But I mean, like the real prerequisite for ministry is your life.
Yeah.
You know, it's the action ministry is taking up your cross and presenting yourself on this altar And that's where you're supposed to like live,
Yeah.
you know? It, to me, I was just thinking of, as you were speaking, just how God is communicating with me in this time and season of my life.
Yeah.
So, for those who don't know, like, I took this trip to Kansas City to go to IHOP, so this is the International House of Prayer, and just like the total upheaval, like God did, in terms of who I was, and the mess that I let myself come into, versus who I know He's called me to be. And it wasn't even one of those things where it's like a great, you're this, you're that, you're going to do this and that. It wasn't even about the things that He would bring me into. It was actually just like the moments that I have with Roman, my own son, just this like eye contact to where, his total focus and attention's on me. That's what I'm feeling from him, that fatherly gaze, to where as I'm 100%, distracted by so many other things, his focus doesn't shift. And so when we finally lock eyes, then I start to understand the meaning He's conveying in that, because oftentimes I would look to other things because I felt apart from God. I mentioned earlier within my testimony, like my parents fighting and arguing all the time, like that. That gave me this void, this father wound that I carried into my relationship with God, to where rejecting Him as Father was very easy. And so everything has been, in this time and season, just intimacy in face to face. And I want to share things with you. I want to talk with you. I want to walk beside you. I want you to realize how deeply embedded and invested I am in you. Not for the stuff that you can do for me, because there's plenty of people who are qualified. There's plenty of people who are prepared, even, who've been groomed for years and years and years to get to this thing that we call ministry. And they have all the right training. You could put them in front of 1,000 people tomorrow and they're knocking it out of the park, kind of thing.
Yeah.
But there's something very different about God trying to leave His mark on you. He's trying to imprint you. You know what I mean?
It's going to brand you.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And that requires that stealing away, that pulling away. And some of that comes from just becoming aware of the chaos around you.
Yeah.
Being in those jacked up situations where it's like there is no earthly way out of this that is pretty, or it won't cost me, my integrity or my family or something of that nature.
Yeah.
Along the way. And so because of that, as a man, like, finance is a huge thing. We will look for whatever brings in the best paycheck, with like the least amount of work if possible,
Right.
kind of thing. Or if we have to go ahead and grind ourselves to the bone, then we'll do that too. But whatever it takes to get that demon off your back, you know what I mean? Debt, lack, poverty, get that junk off you.
Yeah. I mean, that TD Jakes clip it says it better than I've ever heard it before. Oh yeah, it's so profound.
Yeah, it's a profound clip. You can find it.
How did he say it again? It's basically like, if you're working, you're not with your family.
Yep.
And if you're with your family, you're not working.
Yep. Being either pushing the cart forward, leading the family forward by, making the horses do what they do, or being in the back of the wagon with the family.
Exactly.
And I believe he said that, as you said, the man who's out there, working and grinding, he has money, but he has no relationship with his family.
Yeah.
And the guy who's inside of the caravan or the wagon all the time, that guy has a great relationship with his family, but he doesn't even have $5, and he got that from mama and them, and that's just one element. Yeah. There's so many other things.
Oh yeah.
Me
and you have recently, we've recently had this struggle.
Yeah, there's so many other things. I mean,
career changes for us. That's the reason why that's the reason why I'm describing this as chaos right now. It's because
get back in that.
it's because Mitchie. It's simply because when the pieces of your life, what are like the 3 or 4 things that are normal, like that everybody has to deal with? It's like work, church for people like us, our family, and then like our
like your health,
your like where you live, you know. Okay, so 3 years ago I left everything that I knew and came to Florida, and I have had how many career changes I don't even know since then. Like COVID, like took my career away from me because I was in production. Got hired on at a church. It was too far away. Ended up having to quit. And then I ended up starting at another job, and ended up that didn't work out. And now I'm starting a whole new career path. I'm going to school for, and it's like chaos. And then I got other things going on. I'm trying to do a podcast. It's like I mean, there's a lot of moving elements. And then I have a new baby, and you got 2 new kids, So I mean, like it's just all kinds of stuff going on, and that's another thing we probably need to touch on before. I know you got to go because I know your wife is probably ready for you to come back now, but
yeah, probably. I don't know. The phone's on Do Not Disturb.
Yeah,
Didn't see it.
But we'll wrap up here in a second. But I definitely want to touch on this. With as many things that we have to navigate, like the career changes, and you recently, I don't know how much you want to get into your personal stuff, but like you had recently you had a huge shift as far as where you live. Now you're living up in Crestview, and now your church is what, 45 minutes away?
Yeah, like 30 minutes away. Basically, I know I got to get going to get there. Like I have to put in the effort to make sure to be on time and everything like that. Mm-hmm. It's not easy. Yeah, it's a decision.
And so you got 2 twins, and then you got that 45-minute drive, which you work from home now, which is great. Mm-hmm. I mean, basically, how do you juggle all this and also do ministry at the same time?
I don't anymore. Like I really recognize that it's all the same. Mm-hmm. Because when I was trying to juggle it, something has to go up, something has to go down. It's just been what it is to me is it is all a display of God's faithfulness. It is a revelation of Him as provider. Just as you're talking about with Jireh, it is an understanding of Him being foundationally the thing that we're building from. He's our regional platform, as well as where we aspire to go. Mm-hmm. Just realizing that He has to be we have to be totally immersed in Him, and He has to be immersed in everything we're doing. This is not like a time where I get to make decisions anymore, because those tend to come out of angst and anxiety and just a general desire to make something happen, and that typically comes without consultation with God.
Yeah.
And so every single time you end up doing that, you'll lose. Because you're not even looking for God's best, and God's best actually might not even be ideal in terms of money, in terms of what you desire out of things, maybe influence, maybe positioning and all that. Mm-hmm. I mean, for me, like I've had opportunities presented to me to get out of some of this mess, but they would require a move like out of state.
Yeah.
And it's like, as tempting as that would be, I know that my calling to this particular church, Division Church, Walton Beach, it's tied into everything else that God is trying to do in my life. Mm-hmm. Because this is where I'm learning, this is where I'm growing. So the temptation that the enemy will tend to offer you is you can have everything, but you have to go away from what Jesus is doing in your life, what He's calling you to. you think that you'll be able to go back into that thing very easily, but you won't, because the money will be too good. You know what I mean? Like your family would be happier than it's ever been.
Yeah.
Like you're not dying in the inside anymore from the weight of trying to figure out how to hustle and pay bills or do whatever, if you're in a financial rut or whatever. But yeah, I've learned to stop juggling it all and just surrender it all.
Yeah.
And that is a day by day process. I don't always get that right. I still become temperamental and moody and very analytic of like everything before me. And today, because my wife and I, we do desire to get a house, but maybe facing some news like we might have to rent for another year. So it's like, if that's on the table, then what are we willing to accept in terms of price, all those things like that. Because, with this job, like I'm honestly going to be making more money than I've ever made. It's not a whole lot, for everybody else. It's a lot for me. But recognizing that I can't squander that, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I'm still responsible for, paying tithes and still responsible for giving. And I just plugged, EDCC out there in Africa. Like I have a desire to give, heavily there. Like there's so much that I want, and yet I have to be wise and say, is this in line with what you want, God? Because other than that, the thing that I'm fighting is you.
Sure.
The whole way through. And so, yeah, to just prepare to land the plane, so to speak. Like, it was funny to me that my now favorite verse is actually the verse that was propped up as like verse of the day in the Bible app. And that is Psalm 27, verse 4. And this is David writing. And he said, "One thing I've asked of the Lord, that will I seek after, that I may dwell in the house of the Lord all the days of my life, to gaze upon the beauty of the Lord and to inquire in his temple." And so I feel teary-eyed even like talking about it. Like David being a man of God who, not just a man of God, but I mean like a man's man, exemplifies everything that you would want. He has access to anything that he would want. He's not struggling financially. He knows who he is, the boy's king.
Right.
He has the praise and adoration of man. He has the lustful gaze of women. Like all the things that we
would want. Yeah, he's got it.
He has it. And David is saying, I would trade all of this away right now if it meant that I could spend time in your temple, if I could just resign my life away to be a priest. Now, he's the king now. Remember, David tries to move the ark, and there's some problems there because, they're not doing things according to plan. But he has this idea that he wants to put the presence, the actual like vessel for the presence of God, as close to his home as it can be, without it being directly in it. Like that's his heart. So when we talk about in the Bible describing David as a man after God's own heart, it was not like David was out here showing off. David was for real about this, to the point in his private writings, he's writing down that I would trade away this life right now if it meant that I could spend the rest of it just serving you. And the inquiring part right there is, I just want to make ponders. I just want to meditate on your beauty, on your goodness, on who you are. And so God's been teaching me to stop what I'm doing and to focus on that, because otherwise I get swept up in the chaos and the cycle begins again, where Greg starts to try to do all these things that make so much logical sense that it seems illogical that they failed, and I don't believe my family can afford the consequences of me being in charge. God has to be in charge, so even with the opportunity to be here, making sure the message is clear that Jesus has to be the center. Jesus has to be the focus. Jesus has to be the idea. He has to be your waking up. He has to be your midday, pondering. He has to be your lying down. And that doesn't come from, just a casual form of Christianity where you adopt the title, but you don't adopt the lifestyle of a bondservant, we are called to resign our lives away, and this is the best deal that we could possibly have, to a life, being subservient to Christ. Paul identifies himself as Paul, a bondservant of Christ. You get the same thing out of, I want to say, Peter and some others, where they exemplify that they had an opportunity to be free to do other things, but yet they want to be totally joined to God, and sold out to him. And so I don't believe I can be a good father without him. I could only be my father, and if it's not my Heavenly Father, then I know what I'd become eventually, thanks to the pressure, thanks to the anxiety, thanks to the fear of failure. I'd run away. I'd leave, because that's much easier than facing, true failure. When it comes down to marriage, it would be just so easy to step out, right? Because you feel like it's better someplace else. But when you know what God has given you, you have to honor that and cherish it and be the blessing that you're meant to be as a man, back towards your wife. It's all for his glory's sake, and we don't get that by having the easy route. It would be nice. It'd be very nice. But, we do get breaks on the battlefield, and we're refreshed by others. That's why these kind of conversations are important. That's why friendships are important. That's why the people who are, your leaders, or if you are a leader in a local assembly or a part of a network, having people who can speak encouragement into your life and to look you in the eyes and say, hey, if you make it about Christ, it works. But if you try to do it in your own strength, then we'll see you in the counseling room, because we got some things to talk about that we should have taken to prayer in the first place, kind of thing.
Yeah. I think that pretty much covers it.
I think so too.
Yeah. Well, Greg.
Brandon.
It was a pleasure.
It was a pleasure.
I enjoyed drinking Dr. Pepper with you.
This is indeed Dr. Pepper.
It's very, very good.
It was average. It was okay.
It was just all right.
It was okay. The conversation made it taste better. Not these 23 alleged flavors.
I expecting a whole lot more laughter in this podcast. But man, we just took the serious route this time. And we talked about some heavy stuff.
I thought about it all day. I was like, either we can just go joke and clown around, or, we can try to get into the things that are necessary. You know what I mean? And we'll find a balance. If it's God-led, we'll find a balance between what is our personality, our friendship, how we interact with each other all the time. And also have like fruitful conversation. Because I think the other alternative would be like, oh, these are going to be the comic relief episodes.
Right.
Like people either tune in or skip it because they're like, oh, these two together can't do anything. Yeah. You know what I mean?
It's not going to accomplish much with this conversation.
Yeah. For the JRE fans, this is not like the Protect Our Parks episodes. These mean something too. But, hopefully everybody who listens, you enjoyed. If you have questions, hit up BHP.
Yeah.
For more. And
what people will not understand about our relationship, I guess, is that when me and Greg here are going through just stuff in life, that
the same stuff.
Yeah, we're basically like on the same plane, and we're going through it at the same time. So a lot of times when I'm calling him, I'm like, dude, like, I can't believe this is happening to me right now. And I'll just explain it to him. He's like, oh my God, it just happened to me yesterday. What the crap?
Yeah, I didn't say what the crap. That's his thing. I just say, that's interesting. Yeah.
But yeah, it's great having a partner in crime in this whole deal of life.
Yes, a partner in holiness.
Partner in holiness.
We are away from crime. Let the thief steal no more. But yeah, great. So last words, folks, go to edcc.africa. Give. Be a blessing.
Tell the folks where they can find you on social media.
Greg Powell. I might not add you. That's on Facebook, Instagram, I want to say it's Gregor's the Black. It's another hard way to find. Guess what? I don't use that on Instagram. TikTok, that's more centered on my son. He's a viral sensation. And then, mostly just through Facebook. If you live in the local area, you could find us at Vision Church for Walton Beach. I am the tall guy, one of the tall guys. And if you see my face, you know who I am. If you don't see my face, listen for my voice. For those who hear my voice, they don't follow another master. But yeah, that's the goofiness. But thank you, sir, for your platform.
Absolutely, man. I'm so glad you came by. Yep. We're going to have to do this again. You're probably going to be on way more, and people will see more of you. And
as you start making big money. Could take off time. For those who don't know, okay, Brandon's dedicated enough. It's 11 o'clock p.m.
Yes. This is
ending.
A BHP After Dark episode.
Amen.
Absolutely.
We'll call it that.
So, all right, everybody. We'll see you next time.